So the session we're in is SQL 2019, SQL PowerShell 2019, sorry, the Lingua Franca for the data platform. I'm going to go across some various examples of different ways that you can import data, export data, work with objects with SQL Server and PowerShell, as well as other data platform assets. And one big example that I'll be using is Power BI. So is anyone using Power BI here? Yes, I think you will like this then. Ooh, that was kind of a gamble. I was like, this is one of my favorite examples, but if like 10 people raise their hand, then I'm in trouble. So I'm glad that was like almost half the room. Right, so obviously cell phones are silent. I forgot mine earlier. Don't be like me. Definitely explore everything that PASS has to offer beyond just this summit that we have here, which, how many people are here for this is your first time ever at PASS Summit? Wow. Wow, that's a lot. Okay. Dang it, I wish I was feeling better. Sorry. I've got 3 little ones at home, and they were sick all last week, and sure enough, they passed it to me. And I got over it kind of like over the weekend slowly and got checked out by my doctor. And he said, yeah, you're just recovering. You're going to go. You're fine. Gave me some steroids. But yeah, not my 2 weeks ago, I could have been like, super vibrant. And I'm just not there today. Sorry. So bummer for y'all that it's your first PASS Summit. And I'm actually showing off a feature today that I've been working on for months, since July. I'm the original requester on it. I helped also specify how I thought it should work for customers, and people are adopting it and liking it. So I hope I get my energy level up as we get into that one. But when I was saying, explore everything PASS has to offer, we also have 24 hours of PASS marathons that they do. There are virtual groups, which basically is just a web meeting with a specific topic, or in some cases on a specific, a specific language. But there is a PowerShell virtual group of PASS, so you can just go to powershell.pass.org, and that'll take you to the page. We don't have the next meeting scheduled yet, but we'll get that up there soon. I'm actually transitioning. I've been the leader of that group for a number of years, and I'm actually transitioning it over to, actually, ironically, the original founder, Ben Miller. So he's taken back over, but I'm going to help him get some speakers lined up. Ben's right there. Raise your hand, Ben. So if you present on PowerShell and would like to do it for everyone around the world, would love to have you. And talk to Ben or me. I'll help get you guys connected and get you into the queue for it. And then obviously there's SQL Saturdays that happen around the world. One day free events, great topics, local speakers and speakers from all over the place, and just great events. That's how I got started. The reason I'm presenting here today is because I got started at a SQL Saturday and did the ones in my local area, and now I've been presenting here. I've been here speaking probably a half dozen times. So if you like presenting or think you might like presenting, it's a great place to get started. So very quickly about me. My name is Aaron Nelson. I do work for Microsoft. I'm a Microsoft employee. I'm required to disclose that. I'm going to offer some opinions today. These are my personal and tried and true professional opinions, but if you disagree, please feel free to disagree with me in comments on anything that I point you to, in issues that I've filed or anything like that. I'm not the be-all, end-all. I'm just sharing my point of view. I've been working with PowerShell for a little over 10 years now, or right around the 10 years mark, with SQL Server, pretty much exclusively, except when I started branching out into Power BI. And I try to improve everything under SQL Server and PowerShell, analysis services and PowerShell, SSIS and PowerShell, Power BI and PowerShell, Power Platform and PowerShell. If it's data or SQL related in the PowerShell space, I do everything I can to get more functionality out there, increase the ease of use, more commandlets, or this year I've really taken on just, now that I work at Microsoft, I have direct access into the documentation. And I've been just updating the documentation with more examples of ways to use it. And they've actually been very well received by the community who have been looking for that information. So to that point, if you know of a certain topic that is under-documented, and I'll give you a perfect example, SSRS and PowerShell. I haven't gotten to that one yet. I did make some updates to SSIS and PowerShell. But if you have a topic where, or it's even a specific page, you're like, this page needs more examples. This docs page needs more clarification. Shoot it over to me. I'm happy to put it into my little queue. I've got a OneNote file of documentation pages I plan to work on. And I've been working my way through it, and I'm happy to add it to my list and try to get things out there to make it easier for people. On the original agenda, and we'll cover most of this here, I told you we were going to talk about Excel. We're going to talk about schemas. We're going to talk about Azure SQL Database. And we're going to talk about the object-oriented nature of PowerShell and how it lends itself very well with SQL Server. I was trying to do the run through and practice the Azure SQL Database demos that I had built for you. And I don't know what's going on the conference Wi-Fi. I can't get through. So I have some demos that I promise you work against Azure SQL Database. I just can't prove them by running them because I can't seem to get through the firewall. But for those of you who are familiar with the past Summit submission process, I think they have a submit somewhere back in like March or April with our abstract. And we're supposed to kind of predict the future of what's going to get released in SQL Server 2019 and have an abstract that's still going to be relevant, put it in maybe April, and it's still relevant here in November. And I can tell you mine is not relevant. And so that's why I want to get to things that we're adding to this session that were not in the original abstract. They did update the website earlier today. But these are things that have been added. 2 of these things have literally been added to the public product this week. Like, they started going out over the weekend. That's the first 2 there, PowerShell Notebooks and Jupyter Books. These are going to be game changers. Literally everyone in the world is going to be using these things. Mark my word, they're amazing. Invoke SQL Notebook. How many of you have seen SQL Notebooks already? Okay. How many of you are familiar with the Tiger team has a best practices check that's in a SQL Notebook? Only a couple. Okay, so I'll try to remember to add the link to that one. So they have one, and you can just run it against your machine and does all these best practices checks for you and just tells you what the answer is or tells you what to do. And let's say you wanted to run that every weekend and then save the results, just in case you're doing best practices right now, but maybe in a couple weeks someone changes a setting and you don't know about it, and you want that best practices check to run and capture that information and just give you an idea of when it changed so that you can go back there and correct it. And also let you know, yes, it was a best practice 2 months ago. You're not going crazy. Someone came along and changed it. Invoke SQL Notebook commandlet can help you do that. And then there's another feature that I'll hopefully try and walk through in the Azure Data Studio for scheduling notebooks that can help you do that. All the code that I go through today is going to be up on my GitHub repo. There's a repo under SQL variant demos. I was planning to have everything up there today, and I got close, and my last commit that I did yesterday kind of vaporized on me. So that's why I don't do sessions on how to work with Git yet, because even I get it wrong sometimes, like yesterday. So this morning I was planning on just doing like pretty diagrams and arrows and things like that and just putting a bow on this session. And unfortunately, I was rebuilding some of the demos that I have for you. So this was supposed to already have it right there for you so that you could play along. That was my whole intent. and unfortunately I didn't make it. So I will get there by the end of the week, guaranteed. I also have another session that I haven't lost the commit for on Docker containers that I'll be doing on Friday, and all of that will be out there as well. So how many of you are already working with containers? Only a couple. How many of you are like interested in it but haven't seen? Okay, all right. So if I've got a session to help you get up to speed for like your dev environment, maybe you graduate that to your QA environment. I'm gonna be doing it Friday morning. We'll touch on it here in this session today with one of the notebooks, but I'm gonna go like in depth with it and do contrasting approaches on it on Friday. All of that code is gonna be 100% inside of PowerShell Notebooks. All of those PowerShell Notebooks will be in a Jupyter book, and you'll be able to download the entire repo and play with it yourself, and it should work on your machine just the same as it does on mine. And even if you're using a Mac, I don't have a Mac, so I can't test everything, but most of it should work on your machine as well. But speaking of notebooks, it's all notebooks from here. So let's switch over, and first things first. How many of you are already using Azure Data Studio? Okay. Everyone, if you're interested in SQL Server and PowerShell, this is where you want to be. It's a pretty simple reason why. The ISE is not getting any more updates. It's in Windows servicing now. They won't be doing any, only it'd be a security issue. That would be the only reason it gets an update. All the new language features and everything are going to be going into PowerShell, PowerShell Core, and the editor support for that is primarily through VS Code. Azure Data Studio is a fork of VS Code, and they integrate it every month, and we're actually able to have the PowerShell extension. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen. Give me a second. I'm glad they have that monitor there. So let me get back. Come on. Come back. Azure Data Studio is a fork of VS Code. How many of you are using VS Code? About the same amount, maybe a little bit more. Okay. You want to use that because you're able to edit inside of a editor that allows you to edit PowerShell code just like the ISE did, but it also allows you to click over here and see your connection, your Object Explorer back to your database, so you can see your changes as you're doing them, or see the object names, or just get the information correctly. So the URL for that is aka.ms/get Azure Data Studio. And if you got your laptop with you, I invite you to go ahead and do that right now and download it. Everything that we're showing today, we're in the public November release build. You don't have to be an insider's build. You can if you want to. There's an insider's build just like with VS Code. It's a separate install. It's completely separate. So all that kind of same stuff if you're used to VS Code. Again, that's aka.ms/get Azure Data Studio. And once you have that installed, you can just go into the extensions marketplace, and that's over here on the activity bar. The little boxes there. Just look over there, type in PowerShell, and there you go. And we're on pretty much the same release cycle as for the PowerShell extension as VS Code. So it's a little bit additional process. So at worst, well, I shouldn't say at worst. We're normally a couple hours behind, maybe 8, maybe 12 hours behind. If they put out a new release in VS Code, we'll have it in the Azure Data Studio marketplace within a few hours. It's been a process to get that all working, but the mechanics are finally there in place in the background. And I was actually surprised that we got it, happily surprised that we got it so quickly this weekend when the new build went out. You're going to want to use this if you want to edit a PowerShell file. This is where you get the editor support, the auto-completion that you're going to see me use today. It brings in some additional capabilities. And it's also, if you're using PowerShell Notebooks, it's not required but again, it gives you all that editor support for all the tab completion, all the language features, all the IntelliSense, all that kind of stuff. So you definitely want to have that loaded up. It's not mandatory. I just can't imagine trying to do it without it. Now down here in the terminal window here, so just wanted to show you one of the nice features of having this PowerShell integrated console. So up here, if you do a new query, file, you can do new query, you can do notebook. If you do new file, what ends up happening is it creates a untitled file of no distinct type. And so the editor doesn't know it's a PowerShell file, and until you do save as and save it as a .ps1 file and then come back to it, it's not going to start giving you that rich editor sense. But if you do this little command called new editor file, and you can just tab complete that right there, and so we can say pass summit 2019.ps1, and I can go ahead and hit enter. Then it creates that new file for me right here inside the editor. It's got that PS1 file name for me, and that's going to allow me to do things where I start getting the tab completion support. So if I want to import the SQL Server Module, I can go ahead and do that. Just so that I've got it in the session. I think I already have it running, but just to make sure. And then I can do my command, and tell it the module, and say that I want it from the SQL Server Module. And then it's going to get me that list of all the commands out of the SQL Server Module. We've got about 100 of them, commandlets inside the SQL Server Module now. So all this rich editor support is right here. And I'm just doing this so that you all can see how many we've got. We've got all these capabilities, and when we finally get into the SQL stuff, like get SQL instance, and we want to tell it the server instance, I can, if I can't remember the name of my server, I've got my up here, that connections pane, which is essentially Object Explorer. I can navigate there, and I can get my server name, or I can get my database name, or whatever it needs to be. I've got that context right there without having to. In the past, we would work with SSMS and we would work with ISE, and we'd have to go from one tool and completely switch screens, and we wouldn't have that context information. So having it all in one tool so that you don't have to keep on context switching is a very nice add. All right. So those are just getting people up to speed, since there are so many people who haven't worked with Azure Data Studio yet. And now let's get on to the really good parts, which are coming in, and the fact that we can do these new notebooks, and we can pick the drop down, and we can do PowerShell type notebooks. And these are wonderful for being able to just document your code and say, to get started, do blah, and then afterwards you can give them a piece of code that says, get dash SQL database, and give it the server instance, and then you can save your connection information, whatever you're doing, but you're documenting your code as you're going along. And that way, whether it's documenting it for yourself when you come back and do it again in a couple weeks, or you're documenting it for some coworker that you share this with, you've got it all right there. So I'll go ahead and close that right now. So going back to things that we had on the abstract that I want to make sure that we get covered. One of them was being able to work with Excel files. Is there a good number of people here who have to import or export data with Excel? Okay, all right, because if there wasn't, I was going to skip that one. Let me go here. Been working on this one, import data from Excel. And so here's a notebook I've been working on for several weeks that did not get lost, thankfully. And as you can see, to get you up and running, I've got some information in it to point you right where to go. So the very first thing is that you'll have to install the module import Excel from the PowerShell gallery. This is a third-party module, if you will. It's not an official Microsoft module. It is maintained by PowerShell MVP Doug Fink, and there's another MVP, former Microsoft employee, James O'Neill, he's not an MVP, but he's pretty well known in the PowerShell community, and he's a large contributor to the module. These guys are really excellent PowerShell coders. They really know what they're doing. They have saved me a ton of time. I have gone ahead and taken a look at a file here, and I'll show you this to let you be able to see with your own eyes a little bit of what's going on inside of this notebook that I've already got running for you. So I've got this file right here, AdventureWorks Dims. I know you guys can't read it, but let me just open it up for you real quick so that you can. I'm a very visual person, so I want everyone to be able to see, not just believe the code that's on the screen, but also be able to see what's going on. So if you've ever been given an Excel file or a set of Excel files and you're told, hey, we need you to import this, put it into some tables, and then we're gonna need you to do that every week or every day or something like that. You may have in the past built up a SSIS package or a couple SSIS packages to do that. There are certainly other tools to do that as well inside the SQL ecosystem. Here with PowerShell, basically to build this one, what I did was to build this demo, I exported all the dimensions out of the AdventureWorks GW database and dumped them into different tabs of an Excel spreadsheet. And just to mock up being able to, getting that request from a customer and saying, hey, we need you to import this file. So there's a little function inside of there, get Excel sheet info. This just allows you to kind of interrogate an Excel spreadsheet before you go and import it. This is just simply being able to tell me, what the names of these tabs are that were in that spreadsheet that we were just looking at. And one thing I never even noticed until this past weekend when I was practicing for this, was that it's got a little hidden attribute. It'll tell you if you've got hidden tabs in there, and that you can also import those even if they're hidden, which I thought was pretty interesting. But moving along with getting this information from the file, let me jump down to here. We can import every single one of the tabs inside of there with about, let's see, this one would be the actual working piece of code here. What's this about? 1, 2, 3 full lines of code. So to be able to import that whole thing, we do that same thing where we get the list of the worksheets that are in there. That way we can run through them one at a time. We do a for each, grab each one of the worksheet names into a parameter. Then we run a command called import Excel, pull in the path of that worksheet, the path of the Excel workbook, the name of the worksheet that we want. We then say, this is one of the SQL PowerShell commands, write SQL table data. We tell it our server instance, a database called blankdb that I keep around. We're going to give it a schema name. And then we're actually going to inherit the name of the tab of the worksheet in Excel and put it right into here. We're going to go ahead and create a table for it. And we can just run this. I probably actually need to clear out my blankdb database real quick because I've been practicing this a bit. But just 3 lines of code, we can very quickly write up something and get it taken care of and not have to worry about it. And, oops. Sorry, my machine is running slow today. But I'll go ahead and delete these and then run it so that you can see it. This is a very simple example, but I'm going to show you a couple other examples as we go on, and we're going to repeat this kind of same pattern of using the same mechanics of different, the same capability, but applying it to different objects and being able to kind of take a chunk of code, change out the parts that are in the middle of it, change out the destination, and then reuse your code. So, yep.
Will it create SQL objects that don't exist, like your Excel schema?
Yes, so that's a great question. Thank you, Eric. The question is, will it create those objects? Yes, and I found out the hard way because I made a typo one day, and I did like DVB or something like that, and I didn't have a DVB database, and it went ahead and created one for me. So yeah, I found that one out the hard way. So yes, it'll create all those. If you have the force parameter and the object doesn't exist, it'll go ahead and create it for you. If you leave that off, it'll just give you an error if it doesn't exist. All right, so yeah, another question?
Yeah, does the Excel data provider, the Office data provider, have to be on the machine that you're running with?
It's a great question. No. The Excel data provider does not have to be on the machine. There's specifics in the module that tells you what you have, but I believe if you download the import Excel module, you get everything with it. And I actually demoed that last year in my session where I had a VM set up specifically with no Excel, nothing else installed, very vanilla, and ran this and pulled it in. So I'll just run this right now. I will tell you right now, I know that this is going to get some errors back. It's some parsing things. There's some people put some funny data into a couple of the fields. So it did a detection on something like, let's say, postal code, right? And it said, oh, these are mostly numbers, and they're mostly, about 10 digits long at max, and some of them have some characters in it. Okay. But I forget on that one, someone put like greater than, less than, and then that caused it to not be able to import. So if you already have your table set up and you have a well-defined schema, you know what the data type is going to be, you might not run into that problem at all. In this case, what we're running into that issue is we actually are inheriting the data type, I don't want to say prediction, but determining the data type from the Excel spreadsheet and taking a best guess and then building our SQL table with that. So that's why we may see some errors as they come up. While we're waiting on that to run, some mechanics about these notebooks. When you hit save, so if I hit file save right now, all the output that I have inside of my notebook is going to get saved with it. And so whether I open that again here in a couple days, or I open that again, I send it to a coworker or check it into source control and they pull it down, they open it up. If I've got this error message right here on this cell, they're going to see that error message. And so, importantly, if you've got server name, connection information, important or sensitive data that you don't want saved, make sure you hit this clear results button to clear out the results before you save it and maybe check it into source control. But calling that out as make sure you know about it, but otherwise it's a wonderful feature, the fact that you can save your results straight into the notebook. Yes, go ahead. What are notebooks used for? So there's 5 distinct patterns that notebooks are used for. The number one and most famous use case is education, or documentation. So teaching people, when I post this out onto the GitHub repo that I gave you the URL to, you're gonna have all the comments in there. You're gonna be able to do most of this stuff yourself. If I add a page in there to show you how to export everything to the Excel file, then you'll be able to practice everything and do the import and practice it yourself. So education is one, documentation is another one. Very huge use case is documentation. Another use case that I like to call out is, let's say you've got a new employee and they need to set up their dev database. They need to install their tools. You can give them instructions, you can give them hyperlinks, you can give them server names, you can say, this is the steps, then, when you get this far, you have to email Bob over in security and get added to this specific group, and this is the exact name of the group, and make sure you get added to that group, or open a ticket, and here's the link to that ticketing system, those kind of things. Onboarding a new employee, I think, is a really important pattern to think of for these. For me, all my demos I've switched over to using Docker as much as possible. And so I create all my Docker instances with a notebook. And sometimes things blow up. And I just go into the notebook and run through the steps. And if I get an error message, there have been times where I just blow away my Docker container and keep a hold of my data files, my database data files, spin up a new Docker container, connect back up, and I'm ready to go. So I forget, there are two other patterns for them. One of them is that same pattern that I was telling you about earlier, which we're going to get to as we get closer to the end, is the automation. So if you've got that best practices check that you want to run and you want to save the results, or you've got whatever it is, you've got something you want to run daily, hourly, nightly, and you want to save the results out. But when someone wants to go and interrogate it, they get the notebook with it. They get all the documentation. That's instead of just having raw table dumps. That's another primary use case for notebooks. So this has gone ahead and imported most of those tables. Again, I said that not all of them were going to get imported successfully. Can you run these notebooks outside of Azure Data Studio? So for PowerShell Notebooks, you can, I believe, run them outside of Azure Data Studio so long as you have the pip installed for it, which is the PowerShell kernel. So how many people in here actually use true Jupyter notebooks? Okay, yeah, so for those, which is only a couple of you, but all of you should be able to use whatever your standard system is for that and install the pip for the PowerShell kernel, and you'll be ready to go. So yeah, you can use them externally. This week is the first time they've been available publicly. So we're sure that other people will take note, other teams, and will start using that kernel. It's open source, so anyone can grab it and start using it, making it available somewhere else, making it available in VS Code. No one has done that yet because it's Wednesday, right? And we only it went in the build, I think, on Saturday or Sunday, and we only officially announced it yesterday. So yes, I expect others will be using it. The question is, if you're executing SQL commands, you could do that outside. Yeah, so if you want to do just SQL commands, you would just create a new notebook, just leave it on SQL, and there you go. And then as we get into Jupyter Books, which is this little guy over here on the left, this is my example for what I'm going to be showing off on Friday on installing, creating from scratch your own Docker containers. And this is a Jupyter book. And so inside of here, I've got a lot of PowerShell notebooks. It tells you how to install Docker Desktop, create your containers, things like that. But as you get further down in here, after you get through the install stuff, and you've maybe downloaded some sample databases, you'll get into some steps that are T-SQL. And then those will be in T-SQL notebooks, not in PowerShell notebooks. But I'm able to wrap them all up in this one Jupyter book and stack everything together and give you a nice flow. And one of the beautiful things about this, hopefully it's still working. Let's see if I can get it from here. If I go to home, should allow me. There is, sometimes these buttons disappear and I have no idea why they disappear. There's a way that once you get down to the bottom of these steps, they allow you to move on to the next notebook in the sequence. And I'm not sure it was working. I'm just not seeing it right now. Definitely gonna have to get that figured out by Friday. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And it doesn't have to even be, it could, obviously you'd probably do T-SQL. We're at a SQL conference. But one of the notebooks you might have in here might be a Python notebook, right? And there's a Python kernel built into Azure Data Studio or in R, right? So you can have your sequence of events, get things set up for you, use some PowerShell steps, maybe some T-SQL steps, Python, R, different languages, and then come back and maybe clean things up with SQL or PowerShell and just, kind of, for me as a demo, someone who's setting up demos, I'm going to have a section down here at the end that says, all right, just nuke everything. You're done. Reset, get ready for the next presentation. Yes, next one. These are the only languages that are available in Azure Data Studio, officially supported of today. there is, if you look at Manage Packages and you click on Add New, you can search and you will see that there's, I don't know what other packages are out there in the world. If anyone knows one and wants to shout it out, I can. NUMPY, thank you, Eric, NumPy. So I don't know if it's available. If it is and it finds it, so look, package version 1.17.3, does that sound about right, Eric? Okay, so then we hit install, and it would go and download it from the repo, and then I don't know if it would show up in the dropdown, but you would have access to it. You would now have it on your machine, and you would be able to call it. If you want more information on that, Vicky Harp is one of the key people here at this conference that you can ask about that. The person who codes on this stuff the most is a guy named Chris, and he's actually at Ignite. So unfortunately, it would be wonderful if he was here, but unfortunately he's not. But he would definitely be able to give you the answer on that one instantly. So, all right. Enough of that for now, at least. Just trying to make sure I hit some of the other stuff that we talked about here. So close this one. Let me do exports. So we did import data from Excel. Does everyone feel like they've got a good handle on that one? Any more questions on that one? Yep. No, the import Excel module does not require Excel to be installed or anything. I did a demo of it last year and had a VM that had only, SQL Server installed, Management Studio installed, PowerShell installed, and then a couple of the modules, including import Excel, and that was it. Nothing else. So works by itself. All right. I'll go ahead and close that one down for now. We can certainly come back to it if folks think of more questions. I just want to make sure we hit things that we talked about in that abstract. Let's see. Show open editors, export schema to files. So coming back to that pattern and kind of linking a little bit here. So if you take a step back, and sorry that this is so small, but everyone's here familiar with SSMS and Object Explorer, right? There's not anyone who doesn't use this tool, is there? Am I wrong? Okay, no one raised their hand. So I think everyone knows how Object Explorer and SSMS works. So it's a very simple pattern of you've got your server instance, and then you've got your databases node, and under databases, you have your list of databases. And then when you go to a database, underneath of there, you've got tables, and then you've got your list of tables. This exact same pattern that you're seeing right here, if you right-click and start PowerShell from here, it'll navigate you with what's called a PowerShell provider directly to that path of wherever you navigated to. So one of the examples that I like to use with this is if you've ever needed to go into programmability stored procedures, and you had some folks who created some new stored procedures, didn't bother to check them into source control. It's never happened to me, but I've heard others have had that problem. And you wanted to just go ahead and find out what were the last ones that were created and be able to script them out. You can come in here and navigate down there. You can sort by create date in Object Explorer. You can find all these appear to have been created at the same time. But obviously, let's say some new ones have been created, you'd be able to figure out which one of those are and be able to script them out. But let's say that's okay if it's on one database, but what if you have 7 databases that you've got to go and inspect, and it's more than just stored procedures, you've got to check all the views, and you've got to check all the functions and all that kind of stuff. That's going to get tedious really quick. With PowerShell, you can come in here and start PowerShell from these locations. And so we'll go ahead and let this one fire up right now. So earlier I had started just at the very top level. And if we say dir at this top level, it gives you everything that's in there, and one of the standard things is obviously databases. And then if we do a dir on databases, we get that same list back that you see in Object Explorer. And if we start PowerShell here from this other location, so we just start PowerShell here, we started navigating inside of the stored procedures folder. If we do a dir there, we'll get a list back of our stored procedures. Now, just like we had kind of looped through that set of tabs inside of the Excel file, we can loop through the set of stored procedures, and we can put a filter on there that says created since get date minus 7 days ago, and I want to script all those items out. And we should be under system stored procedures. Let me see if I can get to that one. No, apparently that's not going to work. Let me try tables though. So, if I could spell tables. All right. So there we go. So if I sorted by create date and I needed to script out these tables, I could go ahead and do that. Going back into the notebook, the reason I ran you through that is you can look through your the different nodes of your SQL Server, almost as if it's a hard drive, and you can go into, for example, you can go into the wide world importers, go under tables, and do a filter so that you look for those latest ones that were created recently. And I've written a script here just as a basic example of being able to look through there, and in this case, maybe just look at maybe this whole purchasing schema is the new schema, and I need to be able to script all those out. Well, I can do that really easily inside of PowerShell. I can come in here, take that same location, filter it down to purchasing schema, and then here, this first line, that's just telling me which object is being done, because otherwise it'll come back with no input. And then I take that table as it comes back, and I just script it out and port it out to a file name. So here it's telling me, here are the ones that got created, and then it's going to go to this location, tables, and it will have scripted out all my tables from there. So if I do go to that location, here's my files that got scripted out, and then we can take a look at this, and we can see that this will be a create statement for a table. So then this was going to be where I then segued over to, okay, take your schema and now import it to your Azure SQL Database, but I can't get through the firewall, so unfortunately, that demo, you're going to have to trust me that it works, or not trust me and tell me that I need to prove it to you in maybe a session for the PowerShell Virtual Group Pass when I'm back on my home one. That's a great question. Is that PowerShell provider built into SSMS? No, so that PowerShell provider comes with the SQL Server Module, and you want to be able to get the SQL Server Module, you just go out to, and this is the great thing about notebooks, you just say install, changes down to be a PowerShell module, install dash module, and you say SQL Server. I'll just make that a little larger. Ooh, maybe not that large. So that you can see it, run that, and then it'll pull it down from the PowerShell gallery. We've been, there have been 17 updates, according to Vicky, in the last like 24 months or so of this module. It's pretty regularly maintained, and it has recently taken in some stuff from the Tiger team in the SQL assessment space that is actually going to cause it to have to be updated about every 6 weeks, no matter what. So I was very happy to see that kind of almost like a Trojan horse of like, you can't miss, like you can't go 2 months without updating because this stuff has to be out there. So the module will continue to get more commandlets eventually over time, but it's, if you find issues with it, file an issue on aka.ms-SQL feedback, and I'll just go ahead and add that here. So go there, that's the user voice site, aka.ms/SQL feedback. And if you find an issue with it, report it there, and it'll get triaged and worked on. And also, if you want, if there's a new commandlet that you're looking for, you can ask for it there. So you can install from there. Once you have that installed, that will give you the provider. And let me see if I actually have that provider. I was working on that earlier this morning when I realized that I couldn't get to Azure, so it wasn't going to work. But I can at least, if I've got that already, open file. So, PS drive. Okay, here's the file. I put together a basic example. I saved this earlier, so when you first fire up your session, if you don't have that module installed and you do a get PS drive, you see that there's nothing in here called SQL Server anywhere. You just, you've got your machine, your registry, and your variables. And then if you go import module SQL Server and then do get PS drive again, you see that that SQL Server drive is here. And what I was building up to was the fact that you can make shortcuts to, for example, when I create a Docker container, I go ahead and create a new shortcut to that container as a drive. So here's the container that I have spun up, and then I decide I want to have a drive called, instead of SQL Server, it'll be called SQL on Docker, and it'll already have the credentials authenticated in there, so that I don't have to keep re-entering them in the session. And then it creates a little drive for me, SQL on Docker, and it's pre-navigated to that Docker instance for me. I've done the same thing with SSIS, for example. So I've got maybe dev SSIS and QA SSIS, and if I want to export the packages from dev and then be able to push them over to QA, I can just do that by using these two little shortcuts and cut down the amount of typing that I have to do and server names that I have to remember. Yes, question?
Maybe it's a stupid question, but is the SQL Server Module running on PowerShell Core?
Is the SQL Server module running on PowerShell Core? That is a great question. Yes, it runs on PowerShell Core. It doesn't have all of the commandlets available on PowerShell Core yet. It will eventually get to almost all of them. There's a couple Windows-specific WMI-ish ones that will never get ported, obviously, or unlikely, because they don't have that on the Linux side. But outside of that, the rest of them will. Over 50 or 60 of them have already been ported. Yes, ma'am?
I noticed you had CMS set up in your SSMS.
Yes.
Is that coming in Azure Data Studio?
Yes, great question. So is central management servers in Azure Data Studio? Yes, it already is. I use central management servers all the time. You can install it here. And quite specifically, so if we do a little more on this, taking a little look around what you can with that provider, blends right in, you can actually access registered servers and central management servers from the provider. So if we do that get-ps drive, and we see our SQL server here. So if we do a quick cd to our SQL server and do a dir there, we'll see that one of the options here is SQL registration. So I wonder if it'll let me do it this way. There, it did. If we take a look at that, you see that you can access your central management server group, your database engine server group, which is basically your registered servers, and then if you have registered servers also for analysis services, integration services, and reporting services. So for me, if I do a dir on this database engine server group. This will tell you what I have. And if I do that dir with a dash recurse, it'll then go underneath that folder like Docker's and give me a list back of everything inside of there. So I use this pattern all the time with running a command against all my servers and then reporting all the information back. If I wanted to run SQL Notebook against all of my instances, I'd be able to use this pattern to be able to do that. I actually, I've had them update the docs files to include a bunch of examples when to do this. SQL vulnerability commandlets is another example of when I personally would do this. And those new SQL assessment commandlets that I was telling you about, so let me see if I've got that one open, open file. So, we can just find this one file real quick and then I'll. So if you're using DBA tools, will it find it automatically? It'll do the normal PowerShell discovery mechanism. So it might find it, or you might have to specify. Sorry, I'm built this very well, tested out set of commandlets here. There we go. So here's a notebook I put together for the SQL assessment commandlets. And one of the examples that I kept on using with that is to go ahead and loop through a set of registered servers and run the commandlets against all of those same registered servers. And they've actually now added it. Here's that example. Oh, not that. No, sorry. Here it is. I knew I saw it on the screen. Here's that example of looping through all the SQL instances and then running your same command against all of them. And that is, actually, the team came back and they actually now will accept a registration object. And so you don't even have to build the loop anymore. They'll actually just accept a registration object and run it against everything for you. They made it one step easier. So I never even thought to ask for that. So that's pretty cool feature add there. All right, now I think we've only got about 15 minutes left. Is that right? Sound about good? All right, so let me real quick run you through some other things that I promised you, which is Power BI assets. Has anyone had Power BI get adopted in their organization, then someone comes back and say, hey, I need a list of all the reports across the entire system, across every workspace? That guy, anyone else? Or how about permissions to each workspace? And they need a consolidated report. Well, there are some Power BI commandlets out there. There's a module out there called Microsoft Power BI MGMT. So for that one, it'd be install module Microsoft Power BI MGMT. Once you install that, you can get some information out of your workspaces. You have to first log in with this login Power BI commandlet, which thankfully the version that went out and things got fixed last week now allow this so that once you log in here, and we can actually go ahead and run it right now. Once you log in, it will persist whatever you did for the rest of the session. So I'm just going to come in here, sign into my account. It gives me a little pop-up to authenticate to Azure. And then it tells me, yep, you're in. So once I've done that, I can then go and start running these commands and gather the information from Power BI. I'm just going to take this off and say, I'm not going to, I think I only have maybe one workspace, but I'll go ahead and run this command for you so you can see it work. Once I'm logged in, all my subsequent commands inside of that notebook are going to know that I'm logged in. And so here's back my list of all my workspaces. And I'll just make it a little bit easier to read. But then what I did inside of this notebook was I went ahead and took all the data and I exported it to Excel. And then from there, I went and turned around and imported it back into a Power BI desktop file so that I could be able to publish the results of it and keep track of everything. Does that work for on-prem? No, these are only for the Power BI service. There are a different set of commandlets that from the SSRS team. If you want to do some work with Power BI report server, you can. So that's where it's the only place that I know that you'd be able to work with on-prem. But I actually, in this case, I pull it back down to on-prem. Actually, I kind of built it one more step past just Excel. I actually imported it into SQL Server tables, and I record it using temporal tables. And so that every week I get a fresh result, and we can see the permissions changing. We record all the data sets, all the reports, all the permissions, all the data flows, and all the connections to all the data flows. And all of that's actually saved inside this notebook. So when you go get this from the repo, you'll be able to have all those techniques that I've already sorted out how to do for you. And all you have to do is run it, and it'll create it for you. And everything here is, you'll see it's in my temp directory, and it's called Power BI Service Assets.xlsx. You'll obviously probably want to change that to a different name to suit yourself, but it'll report everything there for you. So now let's get into the heavy stuff that probably have not ever thought of before. So let me see if my VM is going to cooperate on me here. I was telling you that we've got that invoke SQL Notebook commandlet, and that one currently only works for SQL Notebooks, hence the name invoke SQL Notebook in the name of the commandlet. I'm hopeful at some point we'll have an invoke notebook commandlet, but then that comes with a lot of things of, well then if you do that, are you going to be able to support every single possibility that's out there, like NumPy that my friend Eric called out? Well, I don't know if they're going to be able to support that. So I don't know, how do you go forward with that? So I don't know if you need a separate commandlet for each different language or how you would move forward. But the same person that did import Excel module, Doug Fink, he's actually been working on a project to do an invoke PowerShell Notebook commandlet, and he's already built it, and he's got it in a GitHub repo. Looks like maybe, no, it keeps on playing with me. My VM is, it was working fine yesterday and is not happy today. Let me just show you what I can show you though, is when you go to the server and you do manage, and this is where it was going to get into the 400 level stuff, and it is just not going to happen because I can describe it to you, I just can't actually demo it for you, and I apologize for that. If you click on this little book icon here, these are notebook jobs that you can deploy to your SQL Server. So you can take that BP check notebook, you could take that, you can't take the Power BI one because it requires an interactive login. But you could take other notebooks that you assemble and put them out here as jobs, and you just say new notebook job, and you give the notebook file, and you tell it how often you want it to run, all the standard stuff as a SQL agent job, and it will go ahead and run this SQL agent, this invoke SQL notebook commandlet for you. And let's see if here it is. If you're interested in taking a look at it, you can actually just go into your Windows PowerShell modules, go into SQL Server, and it's actually, I don't know why, but I was very happy when I found this. It's actually stored out there as plain text. And get on the screen so y'all can read it well. Cancel. So if you want to see what's going on behind the scenes, when you call it, actually have an entire notebook dedicated to calling this. So go back into my PowerShell notebook for SQL notebook. Sorry, it seemed like a good joke to me. Probably don't have the correct license to be able to share that, but it's pretty straightforward. If you want to invoke a SQL notebook, you, just like running a query, you tell it the server instance, the database might need a credential if you're not using integrated authentication, and then just the input file of the notebook, and then here's where you get an option. You can take the default output, which is just literally it'll respond back with the same name of the notebook that you gave it with appending _out to it. So if you're using bpcheck.ipynb, it's going to give you a file back called bpcheck_out.ipynb. I tried to convince them to add a date time to it down to the minute, make it kind of nice and easy so you didn't have to think about this stuff. And we actually had it pretty close to checked in, and it got vetoed. And so various reasons for that, but it was consistency and other things. But in the help file, I actually had them include a good example for how to create an easy to build time string so that you can build an output file. So you can say, actually, no, it's right here on this example. I apologize. It's right there. So this will give you the current date and time and append it onto the name of the file. And so it'll put it out there for you. So that all is, that way if you run it against every SQL server in your organization, but you store it all back in one spot, then as flat files, then you know which server it came from. That's going to be really important. And you're going to know when the execution happened. This is, again, this is in running it from the commandlet. If you run it as a SQL agent job, so let me see if I can go back to there now. Let me see if it'll, new notebook. There, it's coming up this time. So if I want to take this and say BP check, and I say I want to run that every week, or maybe I want to run this other one, SQL assessment. There are two options that you want to know about. One is the storage database, okay? So the storage database is where the results get stored. Now, when you're running it with the commandlet, invoke SQL Notebook, everything is getting stored back to flat file, all right? It's basically a JSON file, nothing super fancy, all right? When you run it, let's start with execution. When you say execution database, so let's say Adventure Works, that's where it's going to run and do all these checks or whatever. You know, it could be importing the data from Excel. And then so it's going to import the flat files and it's going to store them and result them in that Adventure Works database. The storage database is where the results are going to get logged. Now, typically, traditionally, we're actually very used to all the results for our SQL agent job get stored in the MSDB, and we don't even have an option to store them elsewhere, right? But this is JSON, and after a while, this could get kind of large, and this could start to junk up your MSDB. And they thought ahead on that one and decided, hey, we're going to give you the option to store it wherever you want. So you can put it into the same database that you're executing if you want, or you can store them into a central database. As of this time, you cannot store it on a different instance. It has to be on the same one for performance reasons. But those are some of the main options that you have. And then you then either create a new schedule or pick a schedule that you already have existing, click OK, and then you're ready to go and run your, you've got your notebook schedule ready to go, and it'll run just like any other SQL agent job. Any more questions? Can you set up a notebook job from SSMS? As far as I know, no, but they did drop a new version of SSMS over the weekend, so I don't know, maybe they put it in there. Like, I don't want to lie to you, it could be. So, the first part of the question, could you repeat that? Yes, you can see all SQL agent jobs in Azure Data Studio, not just the notebook ones. Yeah, absolutely. Session evaluations, before we go, they want you to do these. I apologize that I don't have the fervent energy and I didn't get this all tidied up. I promise you this, URL. I'm going to give it to you again. I will get all this cleaned up. I will put some pretty pictures and some diagrams and some arrows to make it easy to understand and follow what I was trying to convey to you today. I'm sorry I wasn't at my 100%, but we only get this conference once a year, and this stuff just came out this week, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And I hope, are any of you guys going to use notebooks now? Yes, almost everyone, yes. Question? Yes?
I think I read in the blog that Azure Data Studio is taking over SSMS in concept. I read somebody saying you might as well start to forget SSMS.
Oh, no, not forget SSMS. Now, what I would say is, so trying to repeat the question, is Azure Data Studio replacing SSMS? If they wanted to do that, and I work for Microsoft, but I am not on the product team, I'm not on any product team, it would take years of dedicated engineering effort, a team of 20 engineers working for multiple years, let's say 4 years, I'm just making up a number, in Azure Data Studio just to come close to all the features that are already in SSMS. You know, we have no SSIS support in Azure Data Studio, no SSAS support in Azure Data Studio right now, right? And they may or may not get those in there in the future. I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm not on the team. But I would suggest use it as your daily driver as much as you can. Start there. It has some very beautiful, simple ways so that you can, when you're in this connections menu, if I right-click here, I can actually launch some of the wizards from Management Studio. If I'm working on Windows, I can actually, if I go down on the database level, I can do my backup, and that'll bring up, oh, sorry, not that one, backup. Sorry, I misremembered that one. The import wizard, is that, no? There's one of these. I think one of my extensions is broken. But as long as you have there's an extension here called Admin Pack. And when this is loaded, this usually would allow you to right-click here. And there are a couple options like the generate scripts and things like that would then pop up. And I don't know why they're popping up. They've always worked before, but I promise you they work. If you're on Windows and you have SSMS installed, you'd be able to get a couple of those menus from SSMS and you'd never even have to open it. And the other nice thing about it is, let's see if it's from here, new query. Oh, it didn't, something's wrong with this, I'm not sure what happened. But if you're in SSMS and you say, let's say you created a nice long script and you've got you're stepping through fixing a problem, then you realize, oh man, I should have created this as a SQL notebook from the very beginning. You can just right click here and you've got this Azure Data Studio node, say new notebook. It'll then not only come over to Azure Data Studio, but it'll also bring that connection information, the server instance and the database that you're connected to, and help you get right back into work wherever you're at. Ma'am, did you have a follow-up to that question?
No, I think part of it was, like, I love to use TFS in SSMS. You're killing me with your
TFS and SSMS. So I'm going to defer to Vicky Harp on that one. And Vicky Harp on Twitter, she's also
really cut that one out.
that is.
That drives me towards this.
I use all Git now, so I no longer have TFS issues myself. But I know I understand people have issues, and Vicky Harp is who you need to talk to. She's here at the conference. I believe she'll be here all week. She'll be probably down in the exhibition center. Very simple. Vicky Harp on Twitter. She's pretty responsive, and she covered it earlier. They're working on. Oh yes, there will be continued progress on both. SSMS will get new features. Probably the majority of the new features will go to Azure Data Studio, but SSMS is going to be here for a good while. It's going to take a long time. So. Yeah. Yeah. And more of those management classic management, if you will, features are going to get eventually rolled. And some of them, quite frankly, I'm going to push that, like, we skip the wizards. Let's just give us a commandlet that handles that, and we can just do that, and it's going to be easier. So we'll see if they let us get away with that. Yeah, that's about it. I am over time. I'll stay here and answer questions as long as you want. Please hit me up, SQL Variant on Twitter, SQL Variant on the repo. Oh, let me give you that link one more time to the repo. I promise I will get those out to you. Thank you very much for coming out.